Good morning. Thank you all for coming today. Today's message deals with Luke chapter 15. Luke 15 is about three different parables that Jesus told, and they were three very different parables, but I think they all illustrate a good point about the heart of Jesus, seeking and saving lost people. The first parable tells us about sheep. And according to the text, Jesus asked, what man having 100 sheep, if he lose one, wouldn't he leave the 99 and go and find that one which is lost? Then he tells a parable about a lost coin, in which he speaks about a lady that loses a coin, and she does everything she can to find it. She sweeps, she cleans, and finally when she finds the coin, she has a celebration, calling her friends and family together. But it's the third parable that I want to focus on today. And we're out here on location, and on a farm actually, and it's about the prodigal son. The prodigal son began life as a very blessed individual. He had every comfort that anyone would want growing up. And as Jesus relayed this parable to his audience, he said that for whatever reason, the younger son didn't want the lifestyle, didn't want the comforts, didn't want the life that the father had prepared for him. So he tells his father that he would like to have his inheritance. His father complies, and not many days after, the young man gathers everything he's got together and he leaves. He leaves home. He goes out into the world, and he lives the party life. Whatever he wants to do, he does. Whatever ungodly act he wants to do, he does. But like most of us, if we were to follow our inclinations that way, he found himself one day in ruin. Everything was gone. And not only was everything gone, there was a famine that came up in that particular part of the country. There wasn't any more money. Whatever friends he had rented or bought while he had plenty had forsaken him. And everything being gone, he was desperate. In his desperation, he found employment. And his employment took him to a place very much unlike his home life. He went to a hog farm. Back home with his father, the prodigal enjoyed every luxury that money could afford. The father had slaves, and he also had servants. One may have been paid, the other one wouldn't, but whatever there was to do, there was hired help or a slave to do it. The young man turned his back on all that, turned his back on everything the father had to offer, and his journey took him to a place not a whole lot unlike where I'm standing now. He was hungry. He knew that there wasn't anybody there that cared for him. If he was going to get by in life, he was going to have to take care of himself, which meant finding a job. He was able to go to a man that lived in the country where he was and persuade him to give him a job, and his job was feeding hogs. Now, for a wealthy, little, spoiled, rich Jewish boy, the hog pen was just about as low as you could go.
The worst part about working on a hog farm is the smell, but you get used to it.
Been working on a hog farm for about 15 years, and probably the worst thing about the whole place is the smell. The thing about hogs are, you just got to be here. Somebody's got to be here at all times. You know, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, anything. You know, death in a family or even a child being born. I mean, somebody's got to be here at all times.
The young prodigal found himself in a Gentile's hog pen. Those hogs were eating some kind of carobs. He was hungry, and he would have liked to have just some of the feed that the hogs were eating. And friends, I can tell you, even this doesn't look too appetizing. No man gave to him. As he's looking at his lot in life, he's thinking about where he's sleeping now, laying his head down in a place like this, and he's remembering what he had before he left. He thinks that maybe the home life wasn't so bad after all. He comes to a decision. Scripture says when he comes to himself, he thought, I will get up and I'll head back home. I'll go to my father. I'll tell my father that I've sinned against him and before heaven. I'm no longer worthy to be called his son. I'll ask him if he would just make me like one of the hired servants. They've got more bread and enough to spare. I'm dying with hunger. So he began his long journey back. He went away full, but he came back empty. And Scripture tells us that as he's making his return back home, the father sees him coming. He runs and falls around his neck, and the son starts his speech. Father, I've sinned against you and before heaven. I'm not worthy to be called your son. But before he can get out his request, asking the dad to make him as one of the hired servants, the father begins to speak, and he says, bring forth a robe and put on him. The robe was royalty. It belonged to family. He said, put a ring on his finger. The ring was authority, the father's authority. Put shoes on his feet. Slaves didn't wear shoes. He said, this my son was dead and is alive again. And he threw a feast to welcome his son back home.